So we're just about to get started on session 3 of the Onero Summit. It's really been going fast so far. It's been an honor to be with you all here. Thank you for joining this excellent special session of the summit. This session will be a little bit different from others in that we're not going to be listening to students present on their research, but instead we're going to be talking to some amazing young professionals who are in the world of politics and international affairs, who are pretty soon after college right now and are doing great things in the real workforce. Something that some of us who are still in school are aspiring to do. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. We're really pleased to have this panel for you. And I can't wait to turn over to Marcos, a good friend of mine, to moderate this panel. So before I do that, I want to give him a quick little introduction as well. So Marcos Nordenstahl is studying in the Elliott School of International Affairs at the George Washington University. He's originally from Argentina, and he has lived in Puerto Rico, Mexico, Singapore, and now resides in Washington, D.C. His life spent in cultural intersections has given him a uniquely international and diverse view, which he hopes to use in the future career in law. He is an alumna of the Onero Institute Virtual Engagement Program and a member of the Onero Institute's Virtual Engagement Team, where he works primarily with the On the Rise podcast. Marcos, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and for moderating our session today. We can't wait to hear what you have for us. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Elliott, for that very thoughtful introduction. I'm going to be introducing our panel tonight for the young professionals in international affairs. So first, I want to welcome Cecily Fasanella, who is an alumni from the Elliott School of International Affairs at GW with a concentration in international development. Cecily Fasanella is a program assistant at the Mexico Institute of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. She supports the director in developing and strengthening strategic partnerships with key stakeholders in the public and private sector. Prior to assuming her role as a program assistant, Cecily worked with the Wilson Center's Latin American program, the Inter-American Foundation, and the American Academy of Diplomacy. She has conducted independent research on the role of social leaders in the implementation of the peace agreements. Next, I would like to welcome Chris Kim, an alumni of the Elliott School of International Affairs and an alumni of Delta Phi Epsilon Professional Foreign Service Fraternity. He joined Atlas Crossing after spending time at Potomac Strategies Development and in Congressman Bill Huizenga's office. Not only does Chris possess government experience, he also has honed his skills working and volunteering on several campaigns. Chris provides an understanding of the full spectrum of politics. Next, and last, but definitely not least, I want to welcome Max Kaplan. He not only is the former president of Delta Phi Epsilon, he's an alumni of Elliott School of International Affairs, and he has a major in international affairs with concentrations in Asia and international economics and a minor in Chinese language and literature. His interests are the U.S.-China relationship and the intersection of domestic and international politics. He's currently campaign manager on a local election in Connecticut. I'd like now to give the floor to our wonderful speakers, starting with Cecily and followed by Chris and Max, in that order, to please tell us a little bit about their story, their experience, and their journey through professional development in the international affairs sphere. Cecily?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your invitation, Marcos, and thank you to Felipe, who is also here, who was my former co-intern at the Wilson Center. I'm really honored to speak about professional development, and it's something that I don't think that I expected that I would speak on so soon, as I just graduated this past May. But, I think that oftentimes when you come to GW, where I graduated from, and I'm guessing that a lot of folks here are GW students today, when you come to GW, you look around and you see that so many people seem like they have it figured out from their first semester. And I was definitely not a person who had it figured out from their first semester. As Marcos said when he was reading my bio, I've had the opportunity to intern at a lot of places, 5 places total over my undergrad career. And, to people back home, I'm from New Hampshire originally, to people back home, they'd say that that's something, wild. But to a lot of GW kids, that's just a normal thing. But what I've found with my internships over time is it's more about the quality of the internship, not the quantity of it. And I think that when, I always knew that I wanted to be involved in Latin America and international development and working with communities at a more grassroots level and connecting those grassroots communities to policymakers. But I think that I didn't, what really solidified that for me was my internship at the Inter-American Foundation. And at the Inter-American Foundation, which, anyone who's interested in Latin America, I'd recommend that you seek an internship with them. It was one of the most fulfilling internships I've had. Reach out to them. And I think that once you find a place that matches your interests, network with the people at that place and figure out how they got to where they are now. Because if it weren't for my supervisor there, I wouldn't have ended up at the Wilson Center, and I wouldn't have ended up with, my first job at a college that I have now. I'm happy to provide more details on that, but we've got some other great panelists and I don't want to take too much of their time.
Thank you so much for that journey and that experience and your perspective. Chris, would you like to follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Marcos, and nice to meet you, Cecily. I feel like we haven't crossed paths with each other at GW. So yeah, my name is Chris Kim. I just graduated from George Washington University. I was a major in political science with a minor in psychology. So I've done a lot of work in the political science space. My first internship, as Marcos said, was with Potomac Strategies Development. That's a government affairs firm. We work with the Special Olympics, Lions Club International, and a variety of different clients. And it was my first internship, and I was really nervous. And what Cecily said is very true. When you walk in here as a freshman and you meet people that are sophomores, they already feel like they're on the top of the world and they know exactly what to do with their lives. But I never was really like that. I know a lot of my other cohorts here, as I'm seeing on the screen, I see Jared here as well. I don't think that any of us were at that place where we could speak on professional development, but with my experience with Delta Phi Epsilon, and which Max did an amazing job as the president of, we learned a lot about professional development, and I was able to, after my time at Potomac Strategic, move over to Capitol Hill and intern for Congressman Bill Huizenga of Michigan. And I think one of the most important things being in college and kind of navigating through professional development is being able to network really well. And I know a lot of people don't like doing that, but it's really important, especially in politics, just being able to meet new people and not go up to them and start asking them about jobs, but just being able to connect with them on a personal basis. I think it's really important. And as Cecily said before, it's about the quality of the internship. And to make the quality better of the internship, it's about the people you meet and the people you know. And I was able to intern at my current firm, Atlas Crossing, right when COVID hit, and they were basically drinking from a hose. That was during the CARES Act legislation, and you had the Consolidated Appropriations Act in the end of the year. And now we're talking about the bipartisan infrastructure package. So when I came in, it was a really busy time, and there were only 2 people there. And again, when you talk about the quality of their internship, sometimes you want to work at the K Street lobbying firms, Aiken and Gump, et cetera. But it's really about the people that you know, the people that you meet, and your own skill set that you bring to the table. And no matter where you go, you'll be successful if you have that. I know, it might be weird coming from me who already has a job versus the people who are looking for jobs. I know it's probably just like, damn, this kid needs to just shut up or something like that because he has it so easy because I have a job. But we all work to that place, and I hope that through this panel and through everything that Onero does, everyone in this Zoom meeting can really understand what it means to be a true young professional. So yeah, thank you so much.
First of all, thank you, Marcos and Felipe, for helping organize this panel, and also for Chris and Cecily. I think you guys both covered a pretty wide, two very different experiences about being a young professional, especially at GW, and one that I definitely relate to. My first internship in college was for Representative Al Lawson from Florida's 5th District. And then from there, I interned at a government relations firm primarily focused on state legislatures, and our clients were NGOs and corporations that were more national in scope, so that they had interest in multiple state legislatures at a time. So it was a lot of research, tracking legislation. And from there, well, actually, before college was when I did a lot of campaign volunteering and interning when I was in high school, and I carried through, volunteering through college outside of my internships. And then it was actually COVID that kind of set me on, the current trajectory that I'm on now. I was actually originally supposed to be studying abroad in China in spring of 2020. which got canceled pretty quickly, as you could imagine. But by the time it was canceled, it was already a couple weeks into the semester at GW. And so I ended up taking a leave of absence, and I applied to work as a field organizer on a variety of Democratic primary campaigns during the 2020 presidential election. I ended up working as a field organizer based in Nashville for a few weeks for Amy Klobuchar before Super Tuesday. And then I ended up doing campaign finance work for a few months for a state House and state Senate candidate in North Carolina. And then from there is kind of how I ended up in my current position. So I'm currently managing, New England has some idiosyncratic forms of local government. So it's a first selectman campaign, but it's basically a mayor's race. For back in my hometown, actually, for my state rep, who's now running for that position, and who I've known since volunteering way back in high school. But I think that the kind of the most important lessons and takeaways that I've had from my kind of path there is how when you have an internship experience, making connections with people, not just like while you're there, but continuing to stay in contact, knowing these people. Like I wouldn't have my current position if after I stopped volunteering or interning, I just totally like lost touch with all of the people who I had worked with. And using those connections, people will think of you later and remember you when they might need you for something else. And I think that's definitely something that like Onero, DPE, and just my time at GW at those internships really drilled into me, was the importance of making yourself known and keeping in touch.
Well, firstly, I want to thank Chris and also Max for your journeys and your experiences. I think that our panel is absolutely stacked with professional experience. Although all of you are young and have just graduated, you still have so much we can learn from. One of the words that I keep hearing throughout all these experiences, networking, networking, networking. It's definitely one of the most important things that we're taught to do at GW, and it's one of the most important things for our professional development. Everyone knows what networking is, but no one quite, I don't think, I think people want to learn from this panel is what is good networking? Like, when do you know that your networking is being successful? When do you know that you're making strides? And this could be a question to the whole group. I don't want to single anyone out. A lot, yeah.
I can start. So I think that, like you said, there's such a good thing as good and bad networking. And I've certainly had my share of, what you could consider bad networking. But when I say bad networking, I mean that, maybe we had one conversation and it didn't lead to a job, but even then I still have someone in my network who's now, looking to see what I do next. Like I said, the job that I got, I think is probably my best example of good networking. So I'll circle back to that. But when I was applying to jobs, I would reach out to all sorts of people via LinkedIn at places that I was applying to, sometimes have an informal conversation with them. And, multiple of those they didn't lead to a job, but I'm still in touch with those people who I've reached out to. And now that I have my current job, they're people who are looking out for, the latest pieces that I'm working on at the Wilson Center, and are willing to sort of share their resources in making those pieces even better and even stronger. So I think one thing is important to remember with networking is that, yes, you might not get the job or the invitation to kind of apply to the job from every single conversation you have via LinkedIn. And, I keep mentioning LinkedIn because I think right now, when we're in a semi-virtual environment still, it's really important to utilize those tools rather than, say, meeting people at an event that you'd go to around the city. Just because, again, to circle back, you might not get the job from it doesn't mean that that's a completely useless connection. Moving over to what I think successful networking is, and I think that both Chris and Max did a really good job of talking about this. It's not about just one conversation, it's about building a relationship. And I think my supervisor at the Inter-American Foundation is, a great example of that. For those who don't know, this Inter-American Foundation is a small government agency focused on development in Latin America and the Caribbean. And their model of grassroots development is something that I think really should be taken up by lots of larger organizations. And I'm happy to talk separately with anyone on this call after about that model of development. But my supervisor there, she was keen about just not just getting to know me as a professional, but getting to know me on a more personal level as well, and sharing how her experiences got her to where she was. And sometimes you have to make the awkward ask. I remember at the end of my internship there, another opportunity that I'd had lined up fell through, and I asked her if she had any advice, and she said, well, I'd always be happy to put in a good word at Wilson for you. And I never really intended, I think, to go into the think tank world. I honestly didn't understand what a think tank was at the time that I applied. But I think being willing to take any opportunities that come your way, and then really throw your full energy into them, that is worth it. So yes, you can seek out opportunities through networking, but I'd also say be open to things that you might not have expected originally.
Yeah, following up on that sentiment, I want to ask Max about his experience with your study abroad falling apart due to the circumstances totally outside of your control. How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself driven to get results even when the circumstances seem stacked against you?
Right. Well, I think that there's kind of two pieces to that. I think Cecily touched on this very well, which is that not just in terms of networking, but just in terms of when you're considering your career path, what opportunities might present themselves to you, is to always be flexible. You never know what's going to come up, what you might encounter, and for good or for bad. In my case, in that situation you're talking about, obviously bad, but it happens both ways. I think, but I think also I think I was lucky given the timing of it. Was when, I had always kind of in the back of my head earlier thought about, like, if I wasn't studying abroad, then maybe I would take the time off anyway to try to work on a campaign. So I ended up kind of having that plan B. But I think that it's important to always, I think one of the other important things about like networking is that it's not just about like getting people to recommend you for jobs, or like getting a job out of those connections necessarily. It's about learning about people that you look up to, that you aspire to emulate in certain ways professionally, in your field, whatever that may be, or in your niche, is learning about how they got to where they are, and then not necessarily copying them, but figuring out how the opportunities that might be in front of you could follow a similar path. And so a lot of my time, both back then, when I was asking everyone that I knew for advice on what to do, as well as after I graduated, when I was in the search for a job, was asking friends, role models of mine, that were in my network, about what did they do, and like you learn a lot about kind of the diversity of experience, that like there's not really a set path to get anywhere for the most part, and so once again, flexibility and learning how you can kind of mold a path out of what might seem to be kind of very different and diverse experiences.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree that our paths are intertwined, and we can often reflect on someone else's path and adapt our own. Those are skills that we definitely want to apply and we want to learn. I want to ask Chris, having now your transition to Atlas Crossing and your job there, does having a position change your networking? Does it change the path that you want? Does each experience and each new skill set give you a clear definition of what you want out of your professional development?
Yeah, great question, Marcos. I think that, I started at Atlas Crossing as an intern when COVID hit, and I was actually moved up to research assistant with my full-time position in January 2021. And I think, that hits perfectly in your question, because when I'm an intern, right, I'm more trying to secure a job post grad, right? I mean, I think that's what a lot of us are trying to do here as seniors or even as juniors, right? Is to secure something, because everyone likes that sense of security when it comes to your professional life. And so as an intern, I was really focusing on, in terms of the networking aspect of things, in terms of what I wanted to get out of it, I wanted to show my skill set. That's the number one thing I wanted to do. And I really wanted to, create relationships. I was virtual for basically that whole time until I came here in January to work full time as an actual staff member. But I was virtual, so going back to what Max and Cecily said, like there's always networking opportunities, and make sure you have a good follow-ups. Following up with people is the most important thing when it comes to networking as well. But I think to really start that relationship, I mean, when I was like my freshman or sophomore year, I had a hard time even going up to people asking them for coffee. But all it takes is an email, a nicely worded email to your supervisor who you've known for a little bit. Be like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you mind if we hop on a Zoom call? Do you mind if we get a coffee? Do you mind if you're over 21? Do you mind if we can grab a drink? Something like that. And they're always willing to do that, because they were always in that position too. I know these are people that we look up to. These are people that sometimes we might fear, right? Because they're our supervisors and we don't like being chewed out at work, but they're always willing to help us. I think that's the important thing, right? And that was what I was trying to do as an intern. But now as a staff member there, now my goal is, now I already secured the position. Now I want to move up, right? I'm hungry to move up in life, and I think everyone else on this panel, including Cecily and Max, are they want to move up too, right? They want to get into more responsible positions. They want to do something bigger than what they are doing right now, right? And so when you get to that point, and I hope everyone here does, that's basically, you continue to expand your network basically. And what Max was saying, these are people that you look up to. These are your role models, right? Someone that you want to emulate your career path towards. When I look at my boss, I mean, he started as just a driver for Congressman Bill Huizenga of Pennsylvania. Like, he was a driver, moved his way up to staff assistant and then legislative assistant, eventually became a legislative director and moved on to be a chief of staff for Congressman McHenry from North Carolina. So, when you look at that, everyone starts from the bottom, everyone starts from somewhere. So I feel like if you really know what path you want to be in, you know exactly what to do. And the number one thing is meeting people, expanding your network, because in politics, your network is really where you're going to get to, and your network's going to be really important for you. So yeah.
I think that's a wonderful frame of mind, and it also illustrates a lot about the knowledge and skills you develop during the different stages of your development. You obviously point out that as an intern, you will have different priorities than you will once you have your set position and you want to actually move up within the hierarchy. I wanted to ask Cecily and later Max about what knowledge and skills do you see as critical for the field of international affairs for this professional development? Because a lot of people often think of an IA degree is kind of a nebulous term. A lot of people don't understand like what it could actually apply to. But we have not only a think tank researcher, but also a campaign manager and a lobbyist. So like the possibilities for an IA degree are definitely endless. And I want to know more about like what resources you two use to really expand your skills and your knowledge of this career.
Yeah, I can start with this one. What I think I've been saying to myself and saying to other people is an IA degree, I think especially from, a great university, is going to get you through the door, is going to get you to an interview. But once you get that interview, you really need to show them what skills that you have that someone with just that degree wouldn't have. What skills have you got through internships? What skills have you got through, even just a job in customer service? What skills have you got through, professional development that you've done on your own time that make you, the IA degree plus? Because everyone, I think nowadays, is looking for something more with the jobs. And for me, that was my communication skills. And I have, at the Wilson Center and at other places that I've worked at, I've really taken the lead on a lot of strategic communications things. And I've always been willing to ask for projects in that, because I know that I have the skills there that someone else who might have my degree, or who might have my degree from, say, a more expensive school, doesn't have. And these weren't things I learned while I was at school. Nobody takes a class, I think, in Canva or PictoChart or InDesign much anymore. But those skills, I think, have, I have the knowledge to talk about issues within international affairs from my classes, and I have the skills from, my own professional development and from my internships to break down more complex concepts within international affairs and make it, into a palatable infographic for someone on the Hill, so that they're more inclined to give us, their time and their resources for initiatives that we're working on. So I would say that it's incredibly important, not just to network, but to be able to market your specific set of skills. And I'd say for myself, that's communication, and research as well is something that I'm really passionate about. I've been conducting my own independent research with social leaders in Colombia about the implementation of the peace agreements. And I think being able to say that, you have these research skills as well, that's another big branch of skills that people are looking for. And then data skills, that's something I think, Chris was talking about how his networking has changed since becoming, a professional and wanting to move up the ladder. I too want to move up in the ladder. And I know that to do that next, I want to work on my, my data skills and my budget skills, because those are things that are going to allow me to climb up within my field. And those are things that are going to get, you far in the interview. So I'd say it's not just about the network, but it's about finding like what you are good at and really showcasing that, whether that be in interviews or modifying your resume or your LinkedIn to highlight that unique thing that is beyond the degree.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree that the hard skills are an extreme plus to the international affairs degree. Many times when I'm speaking to everyone at school about their educational development, they often say, I want the major international affairs, but I want a minor in a hard skill, like a data science or an economics or computer science, one of those. And those can definitely open a lot of doors and make the interviews a lot longer. Max, what kind of skills, on a different spectrum, more campaign, more, public policy, these things are very local compared to our very broad education about the international system. How do you apply your skills and your knowledge to a more local political scene?
Sure. So I think that, obviously like there's the cliche line of, all politics is local. But I do think that to an extent, like just my own kind of conceptualization of, everything that I've learned at GW is really about how, when we talk about things happening in international affairs, a lot of the phenomenon of international affairs arises out of, local issues and out of domestic politics in the countries involved. And so that's kind of what my kind of connecting interest between kind of my professional and academic careers. But as far as like skills, I think that honestly, I think everything Cecily said is completely correct. And I'd add that, as far as skills that you can learn at GW, like when you're taking your classes, you're learning information. But the thing is, just knowing information doesn't really make anyone special anymore. The internet exists. What you're really learning how to do is how to like discern what is good information and what is not, and how to assemble an argument based off of that. And which leads me to my point is that I think writing and editing are actually like some of the most important things, because you'd be surprised at how many people are not good at it, and how every single job that I've ever had myself has required a lot of it. Different types. Obviously, the types of writing that I've done and research that I've done over the past month or so for this campaign has been very different than things that I wrote before. I've never had to kind of, for an example, like draft copy for like a walk card to hand out when going door to door. But, these are the sort of, there's a sort of transferable skill that definitely applies there. I think the ability to kind of through information is something that GW actually can be very good at teaching, and is something that you should be seeking to refine through your different internships and things like that. Also, as far as like entry-level internships, if anybody here is more on is less experienced and isn't necessarily looking for a job for when they graduate right now, but is looking to kind of build on their internships at GW, is, you know, a lot of, especially entry-level internships, they aren't expecting you to have a ton of skills because they're entry level. So when you're deciding between what to take, you should be thinking about what skills will this give me and how can I then further use those skills? Like what will having the skills that this internship could grant me, like what will that lead to later?
I definitely agree with that sentiment, especially off of what Cecily said about communication. Like, a lot of skills that we develop through virtual engagement or social media presence. When we work on these skills, we're really working on, fabricating information, condensing it into packages, and then, releasing it out and trying to get engagement from other people. In many ways, that's a lot of what GW teaches us to do with our education and international relations. I want to ask Chris about what skills and what challenges there are to access a fulfilled career in international relations. One of the requirements often is a second language or an added understanding of economics. There's many barriers to entry to this type of career. And how do you push past these barriers? How do you move on to the next stages? That's the question I want to ask Chris.
Yeah, so when it comes to the field I'm in, I'm currently not in international affairs, but in the government affairs space, let's say. Max probably knows a lot about this as well. But to really break into this space, you need to really have a niche. Let's say there's a bunch of different policy areas on Capitol Hill that people work on. One of them is transportation, homeland security, agriculture, social issues, the issues going on at the border, TSA, aviation, a lot of different subsections of big sections there are in policy areas, right? And that's why we have the committees. And, let's say you want to be a committee staff member, you want to be a professional staff member, or even a staff director on a committee on Capitol Hill. All those people have a niche, and all those people have an issue area they know, like very, very well. They know how to talk FAA, they know how to talk FRA, they know how to talk BOT. If you're working in the energy subcommittee, everything that's going on in the Department of Energy. Like, to really kind of break into this field, having a niche can be also a skill set that you have. Like Cecily was saying, data analysis, maybe even computer science for some other people, right? Coding, a lot of people are trying to get into that space, right? But if you want to get into the government affairs space, or even, in the academic space, really having an issue area that really well can be a huge skill, right? Let's say you interview for the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the House side, and you tell them about your experience and your knowledge on aviation issues or highway and transit issues and what's going on in that space. I mean, it can be a huge asset to you going down the line, because, just because you have that area really, like, transportation really well, doesn't mean that you won't know other policy areas really well either, right? You're going to be a smart person either way. So really having that niche and something that you can really hit on when you go talk to interviews, like, what's your biggest strength? As you start getting past the interview stage, I mean, the internship stages, what's your biggest strength? You don't want to keep answering, oh, my biggest strength is that I'm a hard worker, right? You want to answer, my biggest strength is that I know a lot about transportation issues, right? I keep using transportation as an example because I like to think that I want to get into that niche, right? But that can be a skill set that people have. And of course, you want to know the other issue areas as well, and being able to think critically about these issues, right? When I first came into Atlas Crossing, one of our clients is Virgin Hyperloop, right? It's one of the Virgin companies under Richard Branson. It's a Hyperloop company. And I had no idea what Hyperloop was before going into this, right? So I had to really get smart on it. How is it efficient? How does this help the environment? How is this going to be safe? How is FRA or the Transit Administration going to regulate this, right? So this is all stuff that you need to know and that you need to really, read about. And, just to finish off what I'm saying, I think what Max said, writing is the most important thing. 1000%, I think writing is the most important thing. Let's say you have to write a hearing memo on what just went on with a confirmation hearing in the Senate. I mean, if you don't know how to write, then you're just not going to be able to impress your supervisors. And how are you going to edit something if you don't know how to write yourself, right? So I think that's very important.
I absolutely agree with that sentiment. A niche is probably one of the best ways to develop yourself professionally and really break through barriers that previously held you back. But there's definitely a lot of people, listening to the panel who don't yet have a niche and are trying to discover it. So I want to ask Cecily about GW. What, clubs or organizations did you participate in GW that allowed you not only to build your networking, but also understand what kind of niche you have a deep desire to learn more about. What types of orgs should the people who are listening to the panel, really aspire to try to join or learn more about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't end up doing a ton of orgs at GW. And I think if I went back, that was one thing that I would change. I would probably join more orgs and join orgs that were outside of my comfort zone. And I say that because the one org or the main org that I was really involved in was an org started by the Spanish department in GW called Chavez Huerta Itliong, which was student led with the support of a couple faculty members in creating GW's celebration of Cesar Chavez Day. For those who might not know, Cesar Chavez was a farm labor activist and a general labor activist as well. Dolores Huerta was another labor activist, and Larry Itliong as well. And the two mobilized Mexican and Filipino workers during the grape strike of the 1960s. And he's revered to this day and celebrated across the country, but so few people know him. And through that organization, I was able to gain a lot of knowledge on farm workers. And, that's certainly something that not a lot of people in this city have. And that pushed me to learn about, from an international affairs standpoint, well, what is the condition of farm workers like in other countries? So now at the Mexico Institute, when we're working on, issues regarding farm labor in both the US and Mexico, I have this background knowledge of farm labor that I got from this, really niche organization that I was a part of. So, I'd say join an organization that might not be directly tied to what you do in your everyday studies. And also I'd say, the former dean of the Elliott School was Ambassador Ruben Briggity. And I remember having the chance to chat to him one time, and he said that just as much as you need your niche and just as much as you need your very fulfilling and filled international affairs career, you need an outlet. So I would say it's just as important at the end of the day to find an outlet or something that you can use to de-stress. So what maybe an org that is a dance org. GW has some wonderful dance orgs like Fuego, the Latin dance team, and Zola, the African dance team. And through those, you're going to have a chance to de-stress. And you're also going to have things that you can talk about if you're in a networking conversation, or skills that you have that, just make you more appealing and vibrant as a person. I mean, I think that some of my best experiences in the professional sphere were ones that didn't feel like they were super professional and stuffy, because I could talk about things that, weren't just in the news. And don't get me wrong, reading the news is so important. That's something else I'd really recommend. But you want to be able to talk about things that people don't get to hear about every day. And that is a way of forming a niche and just making yourself a more interesting and, I think, well-rounded person.
I totally agree with that sentiment, especially when the activities we engage in just don't have to be professional at every single moment. We can also de-stress. We can take time for ourselves. That's one of the things that I definitely want everyone to take away from this panel, that, outlets are important for us, even as we're trying to pursue professional development. I would obviously love to shout out the Delta, because speaking about the news is always incredibly important as a skill as information to just have for avid conversation. I wanted to ask Max to follow on Cecily's statement. What orgs did you participate in other than obviously Delta Phi Epsilon, which I'm very, you were the president of, but what other orgs did you participate on? And did they allow you to understand better what niche you wanted to pursue?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I'll talk a bit about DP, Delta Phi Epsilon, as well, because really after my freshman year, that was kind of the only org that I kind of stayed truly involved with, just because I think what happened was less or I'll circle back to this, but what I'm going to lead into is that ultimately for me personally, what helped me more was, individual people and less organizations as a whole. But I also think that, a lot of the people that I met at GW through DPE and also just generally, but especially through DPE, not just necessarily members, but people who came to our events, professionals who we hosted for events, all were great, not just because they were people to ask questions and learn from, but also because, part of that process of learning from these people who in many cases are far more knowledgeable on their niche than you are on their topic, is that they can challenge your ideas and help you kind of refine your own way of thinking about a topic. I think one of my best friends at GW is a very conservative Republican. I personally am a very, well, let's say, relatively left-leaning Democrat. But I think that like the something that like helped refine a lot of my ideas about the world and about international affairs and about my own professional life was by talking to people who had very different experiences than my own, and going to events and learning about different perspectives, not necessarily to change my own, but to kind of learn more about why it is that I think the way that I do by kind of contrasting. And I think that GW is such an active campus. There are so many orgs focused on everything. I mean, just within the political realm, there's probably like 50 different orgs. But then outside of that, you have so many different interesting cultural experiences. So there's so many things to learn and to experience to gain a better appreciation of others, but also of yourself. And I think that there's so much room there for professional development and personal growth as well. And that's it. Like Cecily said, I mean, it's also important to have an outlet, do something fun.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you mentioned all the events. Going to events is obviously incredibly important for professional development and networking. I want to, as we're closing down, I know time flies. It's quite impressive how things just went on by, but I want to have, some space to give Chris a moment to talk about the orgs that he was a part of during GW. What helped you, know what niche you wanted to go into? Obviously, transportation didn't come out of nowhere. Which organizations or which events really changed your perspective, gave you an aha moment where you were like, this is definitely something that I want to learn more about, that I want to specialize in?
Yeah, so of course I was in Delta Phi Epsilon as well. I rushed right after Max's class. We're in the same grade, but besides Delta Phi Epsilon, just thinking back, I don't think I was part of a lot of clubs either. I think I was really busy with just interning, basically. My second semester, almost actually my whole freshman year, I was interning at Potomac Strategic, just helping them on their advocacy points. And then the next internship I had was being a campaign fellow for Governor Larry Hogan's gubernatorial campaign in Maryland. So that took a lot of time as well. So I didn't really have much time to do anything else outside of that. And then right after that, I think a couple months, I was on the Hill. And so I think a lot of people who are interning, they either just intern or they do orgs. If they're not interning, and which orgs are just as fine as well, being maybe a research assistant at GW, of course. But I think that being part of orgs is important, and having a way to de-stress is important. Maybe I might just be saying that just to agree with everyone else on this panel, even though I might not take the healthiest measures to de-stress. But of course, having de-stressing measures is important. And I think when it comes to networking, Cecily kind of touched on this point. So did Max. It's just something to talk about, right? I think when we see a lot of GW students, I think the other panelists can agree with this. Sometimes they're really just work, and news, politics, right? They don't really have anything else, right? I think, it's really hard to talk to them outside of the work setting. And, sometimes I feel like I dip my toes in that area too. Sometimes, when I see someone else in the government affairs space at GW, that's the only thing I want to talk about, because to me, that's still interesting. But, when you network with people, you don't want to always talk about work. I think, going way back to what we're discussing, like what bad networking can be, I think bad networking is when you literally just talk about work the whole time, and you just badger the person that you're networking with about questions about work. think outside the box. Let's say you like soccer, or let's say you dance, or you like certain music. Like, not just think that those are just things that help you stand out. When you're not working with people, because maybe not in an interview, maybe you don't want to bring that up. Let's say they ask you about your extracurriculars, maybe you want to say that, but in a networking setting, it's a more casual setting, right? And let's say, you keep on talking about the bipartisan infrastructure package that's being discussed in the Senate 24/7 when you're networking. Like, that person's just going to be like, dude, I'm working on this at work. I'm trying to take 30 minutes off my time to talk about something else, right? And so I think, I saw Max nodding his head, but a lot of kids, they think that they are smart, that they are going to be successful if they just focus on their work, but you need to have something else to talk about. I think when I talk about Delta Phi Epsilon, people love hearing about that, because it's not like a typical business fraternity that you see in like other states, schools, and all that kind of stuff, and they want to see what international affairs fraternity is like. And maybe you talk about the sports that you like, and even the Olympics, right? People in the professional world, they do a lot more than just read and write and live by what politics and everything international affairs related, right? So, do an org or do something outside of school that can help you stand out when you have a conversation with someone. You don't want to talk about work 24/7. That no one likes that. No one enjoys that. And I think everyone can agree with that. So yeah.
I 100% agree. I think that what we've really taken away from this panel tonight, as we're closing down because we're out of time, is really about the holistic experience of life. You can't just have professional development without having development in other personal aspects of life, extracurriculars or outlets for stress. Those kind of things will really, really assist everyone's professional development. That's all the time we have. On behalf of the Onero Summit and the Onero Institute, I really want to thank each panelist for their participation tonight. I would like to thank the audience as well for coming and giving us some of your time. And I hope everyone really learned a lot from this panel. I'd like to now pass it on to Elliott so that he can close it down.
All right, thank you so much, Marcos, and thank you again to Cecily, to Chris, and to Max for sharing these insights. Honestly, I really enjoyed this. I learned so much, and I think that's something else. My takeaway is that you can never stop learning. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how old you are. You can always learn from other people. And so, I'm going into my senior year, and this is very helpful for me, and I'm sure that a lot of other people feel the same way. So thank you all for taking the time. We are right about 3 o'clock now, so we're going to be taking actually a 10-minute break before we continue with the rest of the summit. I'm going to leave the meeting open just so that if anyone is planning on coming to the next summit, they can just hang out in here. I'll stop the recording. And the next topic we're going to be talking about is another student presentation. We'll be having Maria Alexandra de Agostino come in, and she's going to talk to us about the recent anti-FGM law in Sudan and the fight against FGM around the world. And after that, we have 3 more phenomenal presentations. I do hope you'll stick around. But until we'll regroup at 3:15, roughly, 15. Hope to see you there. And other than that, thank you again to our panelists, and enjoy the 10-minute break we got.